The twin suns of Kepler-7 were setting behind the rocky ridges when Marcus heard the explosion. He looked up from the hoverbike engine he was rebuilding, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Living alone on the frontier meant every unusual sound demanded attention, and that definitely wasn't the rumble of an incoming cargo hauler. A streak of orange fire cut across the purple sky, trailing smoke as it arched toward the valley floor. Marcus grabbed his toolkit and emergency medkit, then fired up his ground speeder. Whatever had just crashed, someone might need help. The impact crater was still smoking when he arrived, the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone filling the air. What he found wasn't a transport or cargo pod, but something sleek and organic looking, like a giant seed pod made of some iridescent material. Steam hissed from cracks in its surface. "Hello," Marcus called out, approaching cautiously. "Anyone alive in there?" A muffled sound came from inside, something between a whimper and a musical note. Marcus circled the pod until he found what looked like a seam. He pulled his plasma cutter from his toolkit, adjusting it to its lowest setting. "Stand back if you can hear me," he called. "I'm going to cut you out." The plasma beam sliced through the pod's surface like butter, revealing a hollow interior filled with some kind of gel-like substance, and curled up in the center, covered in the translucent goo, was the most beautiful woman Marcus had ever seen, except she wasn't human. Her skin was a soft lavender color that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Long hair the color of moonbeams was plastered to her head by the gel. When she opened her eyes, they were the deep purple of Kepler-7's night sky, with pupils that seemed to hold swirling galaxies. She looked at Marcus and let out a terrified shriek. Hey, it's okay," Marcus said, holding up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." The alien girl scrambled backward, pressing herself against the far wall of the pod. She pointed at the plasma cutter in his hand and said something in a language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus set the tool down carefully. "It's just a cutter. I used it to get you out. See?" He gestured to the opening he'd made. She stared at the plasma cutter as if it were a venomous snake. When Marcus moved to help her out of the pod, she flinched away from him. Okay, he said, backing up. "Take your time." The girl slowly climbed out of the pod, her movements graceful despite her obvious fear. She was tall and willowy, wearing what looked like a form-fitting bodysuit made of the same iridescent material as her pod. But what really caught Marcus's attention was the way she reacted to everything around her. When his calm device beeped, she jumped and pressed herself against the pod. When the evening breeze stirred the metal wind chime hanging from his speeder, she looked around frantically as if expecting an attack. Even the soft hum of his speeder's idling engine seemed to terrify her. "You're not from around here, are you?" Marcus said softly. She looked at him with those incredible purple eyes and said something that might have been a question. Her voice was musical, like a melody made of words he couldn't understand. Marcus pointed to himself. "Marcus," he said slowly. Then he pointed to her with a questioning expression. She hesitated, then placed a delicate hand on her chest. "Xena," she said, her accent making the simple name sound like a song. "Xena," Marcus repeated, and she nodded. He gestured toward his speeder. "Come with me, Xena. I have a place where you can rest, get cleaned up." But when he started the speeder's engine, Xena stumbled backward in terror. The familiar whir of the anti-grav lifters sent her into what looked like a panic attack. She pressed her hands to her ears and said something that sounded like pleading. Marcus quickly shut off the engine. It's okay," he said, raising his hands peacefully. "We'll walk. It's not far." The trek back to his repair shop took twice as long as usual, partly because Xena moved carefully over the rough terrain in her strange footwear, and partly because she kept stopping to stare at things that Marcus took for granted. His solar collectors made her gasp. The automated fence around his property sent her diving for cover behind a boulder. "Where are you from?" Marcus asked as they walked. "Because wherever it is, they apparently don't have technology." Xena looked at him and said something that included a lot of flowing vowels and musical consonants. She pointed up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky space. Marcus said, "Right, I figured that part out." When they reached his shop, Xena stopped dead at the sight of the building. It was nothing fancy, just a prefabricated structure with a workshop on the ground level and living quarters above. But to her, it might as well have been an alien fortress. Marcus opened the main door and gestured for her to enter. She peered inside suspiciously, then jumped when the motion-activated lights came on. Just lights, Marcus said, flipping the manual switch to show her how they worked. See, on, off, on, off. Xena stared at the light fixture as if it were performing magic. She reached up tentatively, then pulled her hand back when the bulb flickered slightly. The workshop was filled with the tools of Marcus's trade: plasma, welders, sonic screwdrivers, molecular assemblers, and diagnostic equipment. To Xena, it must have looked like a torture chamber. She examined everything with the wide-eyed wonder of a child, but also with the caution of someone who expected each device to attack her at any moment. When Marcus picked up a simple wrench, she backed away. When he demonstrated how it worked, by tightening a bolt, she gasped and said something that sounded like amazement mixed with horror. "You really aren't used to tools, are you?" Marcus said, setting the wrench down carefully. "What do your people use when something needs fixing?" Xena held up her hands and wiggled her fingers. Then she touched the wall and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, incredibly, a small dent in the metal began to smooth itself out. "Telepathy," Marcus breathed. "Or some kind of psychic manipulation." Xena nodded enthusiastically. Apparently recognizing the word, she pointed to his tools and shook her head, then pointed to her hands and nodded. "Double quotes, no tools," Marcus said. "Just mental power. That's..." He looked around his workshop, trying to imagine fixing things with his mind instead of his hands. "That's amazing." But Xena was looking at his tools with something that might have been envy. She picked up a small screwdriver and examined it carefully, turning it over in her hands like it was a precious artifact. "You want to learn?" Marcus asked. She looked up at him with those starlight eyes and nodded slowly. "Okay then," Marcus said, moving to his workbench. "But first, you need to get cleaned up. That gel from your pod is starting to dry, and it can't. Be comfortable." He led her toward the stairs to his living quarters, but stopped when she didn't follow. She was staring at the staircase like it was a trap. "They're just stairs," Marcus said. "You put your foot on one step, then the next step, and so on." Xena approached the stairs cautiously. She placed one foot on the first step, then the other. When nothing terrible happened, she continued upward. But Marcus could see her muscles tense with each step. His living quarters were simple but comfortable. A main room with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a small bathroom. But when Xena saw the bathroom, she let out a shriek that made Marcus's ears ring. She pointed at the shower stall and said something that sounded like a frantic warning. "It's just a shower," Marcus said, but Xena was already backing away. "For cleaning, you know. Water." He turned on the faucet at the sink, and Xena nearly jumped out of her skin at the sound. When water began flowing from the tap, she stared at it in amazement. "Water," Marcus said, cupping some in his hands. "From the tap. It's clean. It's warm. It's perfectly safe." But when he moved toward the shower to demonstrate, Xena grabbed his arm. Her touch was electric, sending an unexpected jolt through him. She looked up at him with those purple eyes full of terror and pleading. "Please," she said in accented but understandable English. "No water torture." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat, not just because she had spoken his language, but because of the genuine fear in her voice. Whatever her people's relationship with water was, it clearly wasn't the same as humans. "Okay," he said gently, "no shower. But Xena, you need to get that gel off somehow. It's starting to harden." She looked down at herself and nodded reluctantly. Then she pointed to the sink and said something hopeful. "The sink." Marcus looked at the small basin. "Well, I suppose we could make it work." As he began filling the sink with warm water, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Xena had in store. If she was this terrified of basic plumbing, how would she react to the rest of human technology? He was about to find out. Marcus filled the sink with warm water, while Xena watched from what she clearly considered a safe distance halfway across the room. Her purple eyes tracked every drop that fell from the faucet. as if each one might suddenly attack her. It's just water, Marcus said for the third time, testing the temperature with his elbow. Look, perfectly harmless. He splashed a little on his face to demonstrate. Xena gasped and took another step back. She said something in her musical language that sounded like a prayer. Okay, different approach, Marcus muttered. He grabbed a clean towel from the cabinet and dipped just a corner in the water. See, I'm not drowning. When he held out the damp towel to her, Xena examined it like it was a dangerous weapon. She sniffed it delicately, then recoiled at the scent of the soap he'd added to the water. Chemical torture, she whispered in English, her accent making the words sound like a song. It's soap, Marcus said, trying not to laugh. It makes you clean, smell good. Humans use it every day, every day. Xena's eyes widened in horror. Your people torture themselves daily. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. This was going to be harder than he'd thought. Xena, on your world, how do you clean yourselves? She held up her hands and closed her eyes. That same shimmer he'd seen before began to play across her lavender skin, and the dried gel from her pod started to flick away like old paint. Within moments, she was perfectly clean, her skin glowing with that inner light. Molecular manipulation, Marcus said, awed. You can control matter at the cellular level. Xena nodded proudly, then gestured to the sink with obvious confusion. Why humans choose water pain? Before Marcus could answer, his comm unit chimed with an incoming message. Xena shrieked and dove behind the small couch, covering her head. With her hands, it's just a message, Marcus said, but she was already curled up in a ball. Trembling, he quickly silenced the device and knelt beside her. Xena, it's okay. It's just communication technology. She peered up at him through her moonbeam hair. Communication torture device, no torture. Marcus said gently, just humans use technology differently than your people. We use machines to do things instead of our minds. But why? Xena slowly uncurled herself. Machines are loud, violent. They attack the senses. Marcus considered this. Living with the constant hum of electronics, the beep of devices, the rush of water through pipes, he'd never thought of it as an assault on the senses. But to someone whose world was apparently silent and peaceful, it would be overwhelming. We're used to it, he said finally, and sometimes machines can do things we can't do with our minds. Xena looked skeptical. She stood up and approached the bathroom again, but stopped at the doorway. The water chamber, she said, pointing at the shower stall. What is its purpose? Cleaning. Marcus said, humans can't clean themselves the way you do, so we use water and soap. Show me. Xena said, though her voice trembled. Marcus hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea. You're already terrified of the sink. I must understand. Xena said with sudden determination. If I am to survive in your world, I must learn your ways, even the frightening ones. There was something in her voice that made Marcus look at her more carefully. You're running from something, aren't you? Xena's expression grew guarded. I cannot return to my world. This is my home now, whether I understand it or not. Marcus felt a strange protective urge rise in his chest. All right, but we'll start small. He turned on the shower at the lowest setting, just a gentle trickle. Xena jumped at the sound but held her ground. When the water began to fall from the shower head, she gasped and grabbed Marcus's arm. It falls from the sky, she whispered. Like rain, but inside, exactly like rain, Marcus said, surprised by her insight. Humans bring rain indoors so we can control it, control rain. Xena looked at him with something approaching awe. Your people command the weather. Well, not exactly, Marcus started. But Xena was already moving closer to the shower, fascination overcoming fear. She reached out tentatively toward the falling water, then jerked her hand back when a drop hit her finger. She examined the droplet with intense concentration, then looked up at Marcus with wonder. It's warm, she said. Humans like warm water, Marcus explained. It's more comfortable than cold. You heat the rain, we heat the water. Yes, Xena was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then she said something that sounded like a question in her own language. What did you say? I asked. On my world, we believe that water is the blood of the planet. To manipulate it is to wound the world itself. But here, She gestured around the bathroom. You pipe the planet's blood through your walls, Marcus. Had never thought of plumbing quite that way. I suppose we do, but we don't see it as harmful. Water is recycled, cleaned, used again. Recycled blood, Xena murmured. She stepped closer to the shower, close enough that the mist touched her face. She gasped but didn't pull away. It is not unpleasant. Would you like to try it? Marcus asked gently. Xena looked at him with those galaxy-deep eyes. Will you stay? In case the water torture becomes too much. It's not torture, Marcus said, but he nodded. I'll stay right here. Moving with the careful grace of someone approaching a dangerous animal, Xena stepped to the edge of the shower stall. She held out one hand, letting the water run over her fingers. Her skin began to shimmer more brightly where the water touched it. Oh, she breathed. It tingles. Is that good or bad? I'm not certain. She stepped closer, letting the water hit her shoulder. The iridescent bodysuit she wore seemed to absorb the water, changing color slightly. It's so strange. The water carries sensation, but not pain. Marcus watched, fascinated, as she slowly moved into the shower. The water darkened her moonbeam hair to silver, and her skin glowed brighter with each drop. She closed her eyes and turned her face up to the spray. It's like being touched by the sky, she whispered. Then the water pressure fluctuated slightly, and the gentle trickle became a stronger stream. Xena screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into Marcus. They both went down in a tangle of limbs. Marcus's back hitting the bathroom wall while Xena landed on top of him. Turn it off, she cried. Clinging to him, the water demon grows stronger. Marcus reached up and shut off the shower, but Xena didn't let go. She pressed her face against his chest, trembling. He could feel the warmth of her skin through his shirt, smell that strange floral scent that seemed to emanate from her. It's okay, he said softly, his hand stroking her wet hair. It's off. You're safe. She looked up at him, and he realized how close their faces were. Her lips were slightly parted, her breathing quick and shallow. For a moment, the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Marcus, she whispered. Yeah, your world is very frightening. He almost laughed, but the fear in her eyes stopped him. I know, but you're braver than you think. You tried something that terrified you, only because you were here, she said, quietly. They stayed like that for a long moment, Marcus's back against the wall, Xena in his arms, both of them breathing hard. Marcus found himself studying the delicate features of her face, the way her skin seemed to glow from within. We should get you dry, he said finally, though he made no move to get up. Dry, remove the water. With towels, he gestured to the cabinet. More human strangeness, Xena said, but there was fondness in her voice now instead of fear. Marcus helped her to her feet, trying to ignore the way her wet bodysuit clung to her curves. He handed her a towel and showed her how to use it, watching as she marveled at the simple act of absorption. Your people think of everything, she said, dabbing at her hair. Water torture, then water removal devices. They're not torture devices, Marcus said, but he was smiling. Perhaps not, Xena conceded, but they are very intense. As she dried off, Marcus found himself studying her profile. There was something about Xena that drew him in, not just her exotic beauty, but her courage in facing a world that clearly terrified her. The way she approached each new experience with a mixture of fear and fascination. Marcus, she said suddenly, yeah, thank you for helping me understand the water chamber, for staying with me when I was frightened. You don't have to thank me, Marcus said. It's what anyone would do. No, Xena said seriously, it's what you would do. I am beginning to think that your people are not so different from mine. Despite your frightening technology, she moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of silver in her purple eyes. On my world, we have a saying, the heart that shelters another in the storm becomes home to both souls. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What does that mean? It means, Xena said softly, that kindness creates bonds that transcend worlds. Before Marcus could respond, a loud crash came from downstairs in his workshop. They both froze, listening. Heavy footsteps echoed on the metal floor below. Someone's in the shop, Marcus whispered. Xena's face went pale, her skin losing its glow. They found me, she breathed. Who found you? But Xena was already moving toward the window. Her earlier fear of human technology forgotten in the face of this new threat. We must hide, she said urgently. If they take me back. She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus could see the terror in her eyes. Whatever she was running from, it was worse than water torture. This way, he said, taking her hand. There's a back staircase. They made it down the back staircase without being detected. But Marcus could hear voices in his workshop, at least 3 different speakers, though he couldn't make out the words. He led Xena to a storage shed behind his main building, cramped but hidden from view. Stay here, he whispered. I'll go see what they want. No. Xena grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. They are not here for you. They seek me. Who are they? Xena's glow dimmed until she was almost invisible. In the darkness, hunters, trackers, they follow the quantum signature of my escape pod. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What did you do? I ran away, Xena said simply. From a life that was not mine. To live. Before Marcus could ask more questions, the voices outside grew louder. He peered through a crack in the shed wall and saw 3 figures emerge from his workshop. They were humanoid but clearly not human, too tall, too angular, with movements that seemed slightly off for the trail ends here. One of them said in heavily accented English, she was in this building. Search the area, another commanded. She cannot have gone far. Marcus watched them spread out, scanning the ground with handheld devices that beeped and chirped. Professional hunters, no doubt about it. We need to get you somewhere safer, Marcus whispered to Xena. There's nowhere safe, she replied, but her voice had a defeated quality that made Marcus's chest tight. Hey. He turned to face her in the cramped space. I didn't pull you out of that pod just to let some bounty hunters drag you away. You're under my protection now. Xena's eyes widened. You would risk yourself for me, but you barely know me. I know enough, Marcus said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. They waited in tense silence until the hunters moved their search to the other side of his property. Then Marcus led Xena back into his workshop through a maintenance tunnel he'd built for accessing the building's foundation. We'll hole up in my quarters until they leave, he said. Then we'll figure out our next move. But Xena had stopped dead in the middle of his kitchen, staring at the various appliances with renewed terror. So many tortured devices in one room. She whispered. Marcus followed her gaze, seeing his kitchen through her eyes. The microwave hummed softly. The refrigerator's compressor kicked on with a mechanical groan. The coffee maker's ready light blinked steadily. To someone from a world of silence, it must sound like a mechanical symphony of doom. They're not tortured devices, Marcus said for what felt like the 100th time. They're for preparing food. Food preparation requires such violence? Xena pointed at the blender on the counter. That's just a blender. It mixes things. Marcus was suddenly very aware of how alien his own technology must seem. Look, are you hungry? I could show you how it works. Xena's stomach chose that moment to rumble audibly. She looked down at herself in surprise. Your body demands fuel, Marcus observed. What do your people eat? We absorb nutrients from mineral pools, Xena said hesitantly. We place our hands in the sacred waters and draw what we need through our skin. Photosynthesis, Marcus said, or something like it. Well, humans eat actual food. Plants, sometimes animals. Grains, fruits, you consume other living beings? Xena looked horrified. Yeah, it's kind of how we survive. Marcus opened his refrigerator, and Xena jumped back at the sudden light and mechanical sound. See? Food. Xena approached the refrigerator cautiously, peering inside like it might contain monsters. It's cold inside. How do you make cold? Refrigeration. It keeps food fresh longer. Marcus pulled out some vegetables. These are carrots. Completely harmless. Xena took one of the orange vegetables and examined it closely. It's dead? Well, yeah, but it was a plant, not an animal. Still worried about consuming living things? She sniffed the carrot delicately, then took a tiny bite. Her eyes widened in surprise. It has flavor, substance. It's quite pleasant. Good. Now, let me show you how humans prepare food. Marcus moved to the stove, and Xena immediately retreated. To the far side of the kitchen. That device breathes fire, she said, pointing at the gas burner. Controlled fire, Marcus said, turning on one of the burners. The blue flame danced merrily. And Xena gasped, "You control fire as easily as you control rain," she breathed. "Your people are indeed powerful." Marcus had never thought of himself as powerful, but he supposed as someone who'd never seen a gas stove, it might seem like magic. "It's just technology, Xena. Tools to make life easier." He filled a pot with water and placed it on the burner. "I'm going to boil some water to cook these vegetables." "Boil," Xena edged closer. Fascination overcoming fear. "Heat the water until it bubbles and steams." Marcus watched her carefully. The heat changes the water's state. As the water began to warm, Xena became transfixed. She leaned closer and closer to the pot, studying the tiny bubbles that began forming on the bottom. "It's like the water is coming alive," she whispered. "Don't get too close," Marcus warned. But Xena was already reaching toward the pot. "Hot," Marcus grabbed her hand just before she could touch the metal. "It'll burn you." The contact sent an electric shock through both of them. Xena's skin was warm and incredibly soft, and where their hands touched, her natural glow intensified. They stood frozen for a moment, hands clasped, staring at each other. "Burn?" Xena asked softly. "Cause pain, damage your skin." Marcus reluctantly released her hand. "Heat can hurt you, but you use it willingly. We're careful with it." Marcus added the vegetables to the now boiling water. "Heat can cook food, keep us warm, power engines. It's useful if you respect it." Xena watched the vegetables bounce in the roiling water. "You're torturing the plant matter. I'm softening it so it's easier to eat and digest." Such violence in food preparation. Xena murmured, but she didn't sound as horrified as before. More intrigued. While the vegetables cooked, Marcus decided to try something else. "Want to see another human food preparation device?" Before Xena could protest, he pulled out the blender and added some fruit and juice. When he hit the power button, Xena shrieked, and behind the kitchen island, "It's attacking," she cried over the whirring noise. Marcus quickly shut it off. "Sorry, I should have warned you." He helped her up from behind the counter. "It's just mixing fruit into a drink." Xena peered at the blender suspiciously. It destroyed the fruit. It blended it, made it smooth. Marcus poured the smoothie into a glass. "Want to try it?" Xena accepted the glass gingerly, as if it might explode. She sniffed the contents, then took a small sip. Her expression transformed from caution to wonder. "It's delicious. The flavors are unified but still distinct." She took another sip. How did the machine know to combine them so perfectly? It didn't know anything. It just mixed them up. "I chose the combination. You have an artist's touch." "With flavor," Xena said, and Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest at the compliment. They were interrupted by the timer on the oven beeping. Xena jumped and spilled smoothie on herself. "What now?" she asked, looking around frantically for the source of the sound. "Just the timer. The vegetables are done." Marcus turned off the burner and drained the pot. "See, perfectly cooked." But when he opened the oven to check on the bread he'd been warming, a puff of hot air escaped. Xena gasped and stumbled backward right into the refrigerator door. The impact triggered the ice maker, which dropped several cubes into the dispenser with a loud clatter. Xena spun around at the new sound, lost her balance, and grabbed for the counter. Her hand landed on the coffee maker's power button, and the machine immediately began brewing with a series of gurgles and hisses. "It's attacking from all sides," Xena cried, spinning in circles as sounds came from every direction. Marcus quickly shut off everything he could reach, but the damage was done. Xena had worked herself into a full panic, her skin flickering between bright and dim as her emotions overwhelmed her control. "Xena, stop," Marcus said firmly, catching her shoulders. "Look at me." She focused on his face, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Nothing is attacking you," Marcus said calmly. "These are just machines. They make noise, but they can't hurt you." "So much chaos," Xena whispered. "How do you concentrate with all this mechanical screaming?" "We tune it out. After a while, you don't really hear it anymore." Xena looked around the kitchen with new eyes. Your people must be very strong to endure such constant assault on the senses, or very stubborn, Marcus said with a smile that earned him a small laugh, perhaps both. The vegetables were perfectly tender, and Marcus served them with the warm bread. Xena ate slowly, savoring each bite and asking detailed questions about seasoning, cooking times, and why humans chose to alter food instead of consuming it in its natural state. On my world, she said between bites, we believe that all things should remain as nature intended them, but you said you absorb nutrients from mineral pools. Isn't that different from how the minerals exist naturally? Xena paused, considering this. I had not thought of it that way. Maybe your people and mine aren't so different after all, Marcus suggested. We just use different tools to meet the same needs. As they finished eating, Xena's skin began to glow more steadily, and Marcus realized she was relaxing. The kitchen, sounds that had terrified her earlier now seemed to fade into background noise. The food preparation was educational, she said finally, though still quite violent. Wait until you see me use the garbage disposal, Marcus said with a grin. Xena's eyes widened in alarm. There are more food destruction devices. Before Marcus could answer, a new sound cut through the evening air, the whine of approaching vehicles. They both froze, listening. They're back, Xena whispered, her glow dimming again. Marcus moved to the window and peered through the curtains. 3 hovercycles were approaching his workshop, their riders the same hunters from before. They must have detected something, Marcus said grimly. The cooking heat, Xena realized. Thermal signatures. I did not think. It's not your fault. Marcus was already moving, gathering supplies. But we need to get out of here. Where can we go? Marcus looked at her frightened face and made a decision that surprised him. Wherever we need to. I'm not letting them take you. As the hunters closed in, Marcus realized that his quiet life as a frontier mechanic was over. But looking at Xena, brave, beautiful, and trusting him with her life, he found he didn't mind as much as he should have. The whine of the hovercycles grew louder as Marcus grabbed his emergency pack from the hall closet. Years of living on the frontier had taught him to always be ready to run. But he'd never expected to be fleeing with an alien refugee who was terrified of his toaster. This way, he whispered, leading Xena toward the back exit. There's a canyon about half a kilometer from here. We can hide until they leave. But as they reached the door, the distinctive hum of a gravitic disruptor filled the air. Marcus's blood ran cold. That wasn't standard bounty hunter equipment. They're not just trackers, he said grimly. Someone sent professionals through the window. He could see the 3 hunters had been joined by a 4th figure, tall, imposing, with the kind of presence that commanded attention even at a distance. This one wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light, and when he turned toward the building, Marcus caught a glimpse of eyes that glowed with an unnatural red light. Xena gasped. Valdrin, she breathed, and Marcus had never heard such terror in a voice before. You know him. He was my betrothed. Xena's skin had gone almost transparent with fear. The one I fled from. Your fiancé hired bounty hunters to track you down? He hired them to bring me back for our bonding ceremony. Xena's voice was barely a whisper. I will not. She didn't finish, but Marcus could see the desperation in her eyes. Whatever this Valdrin had planned for her, it was worth risking everything to escape. Then we don't let him take you, Marcus said simply. The front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire building. Marcus pushed Xena behind the kitchen counter as heavy footsteps echoed through his workshop below. Xena of House Luminar, a voice called out deep, commanding, with an accent that made each word sound like a blade being drawn. I know you are here. Your thermal signature betrays you. Marcus and Xena crouched behind the counter, hardly daring to breathe. The footsteps began climbing the stairs, slow and deliberate. You have caused considerable trouble with your childish rebellion, Valdrin continued. 3-star systems searched, countless resources expended. All for what? A moment of petulant freedom. Xena pressed her face against Marcus's shoulder, trembling. He could feel her trying to control her natural glow, dimming herself until she was barely visible. I am not unreasonable. Valdrin's voice was closer now. Just outside the kitchen. Return with me willingly, and I will overlook this embarrassment. The bonding ceremony can proceed as planned." Marcus felt Xena shake her head violently against his shoulder. However, Valdrin continued, and now Marcus could see the edge of a dark boot in the doorway. "If you continue this foolishness, I will be forced to employ less gentle methods of persuasion." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft hum of appliances. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Slowly, carefully, he eased his hand toward the plasma cutter on his tool belt. "I can smell you, little star," Valdrin said softly. And Marcus realized with horror that he was moving around the kitchen island. Fear has such a distinctive aroma. They were trapped. In seconds, Valdrin would round the counter and find them. Marcus gripped the plasma cutter, knowing it was probably useless against whatever armor the alien wore, but determined to try anyway. Then Xena did something unexpected. She stood up. "I am here," she said, her voice steady despite her terror. Marcus started to rise with her, but she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, holding him down. "This is not your fight," she whispered. "Like hell it isn't," Marcus said, but Xena was already stepping away from the counter. Valdrin was indeed imposing, nearly 7 feet tall, with skin like polished obsidian and those burning red eyes. His armor was a masterwork of alien engineering, form-fitting but clearly capable of withstanding significant damage. When he smiled at Xena, Marcus could see rows of sharp, predatory teeth. "There you are, my dear," Valdrin said, his voice almost tender. "You look different. This primitive world has already begun to contaminate you." "I look free," Xena replied, and Marcus was amazed by her courage. Valdrin's smile turned cold. "Freedom is an illusion for our kind, Xena. We have duties, obligations. The joining of our houses will strengthen both our peoples, perhaps. But what of my soul? Souls are a luxury we cannot afford." Valdrin moved closer, and Marcus saw Xena flinch. "You'll learn to find satisfaction in duty, as you have." Xena's skin began to glow brighter, her fear transforming into anger. "You feel nothing, Valdrin. You are already dead inside." The alien's expression darkened. "Careful, little star. My patience has limits." Marcus couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, plasma cutter in hand. She said no, that should be enough for anyone. Valdrin turned those burning eyes on him, and Marcus felt like he was being examined by a particularly intelligent predator. "Ah, the primitive who has been sheltering my property. How quaint." "She's not property," Marcus said, raising the plasma cutter. "She's a person with the right to make her own choices." Valdrin laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Rights, choices, you understand nothing of our ways, human." Xena is heir to the Luminar bloodline. Her genetics, her abilities, her very essence belongs to her people. "My essence belongs to me," Xena said firmly, "and I choose to give it to one who sees me as more than a vessel for genetic material." Something dangerous flickered in Valdrin's eyes. "Give it to whom?" "This mechanic." He said the word like it tasted foul. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Yeah, this mechanic. The one who pulled her from a crashed pod and didn't try to sell her to the highest bidder." "How noble," Valdrin sneered, "and how foolish. Do you have any idea what you are interfering with, human? The power that flows through her veins?" "I know she makes me want to be a better man," Marcus said, surprising himself with the admission. "And I know she deserves better than a forced marriage to someone who sees her as a prize to be." Part 4. The hunter's rive. The whine of the hovercycles grew louder as Marcus grabbed his emergency pack from the hall closet. Years of living on the frontier had taught him to always be ready to run, but he'd never expected to be fleeing with an alien refugee who was terrified of his toaster. "This way," he whispered, leading Xena toward the back exit. "There's a canyon about half a kilometer from here. We can hide until they leave." But as they reached the door, the distinctive hum of a gravitic disruptor filled the air. Marcus's blood ran cold. That wasn't standard bounty hunter equipment. "They're not just trackers," he said grimly. "Someone sent professionals through the window." He could see the 3 hunters had been joined by a 4th figure, tall, imposing, with the kind of presence that commanded attention even at a distance. This one wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light, and when he turned toward the building, Marcus caught a glimpse of eyes that glowed with an unnatural red light. Xena gasped, "Valdrin." She breathed, and Marcus had never heard such terror. In a voice before, "You know him. He was my betrothed." Xena's skin had gone almost transparent with fear. "The one I fled from. Your fiancé hired bounty hunters to track you down? He hired them to bring me back for our bonding ceremony." Xena's voice was barely a whisper. I will not." She didn't finish, but Marcus could see the desperation in her eyes. Whatever this Valdrin had planned for her, it was worth risking everything to escape. "Then we don't let him take you," Marcus said simply. The front door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire building. Marcus pushed Xena behind the kitchen counter as heavy footsteps echoed through his workshop below. "Xena of House Luminar," a voice called out deep, commanding, with an accent that made each word sound like a blade being drawn. "I know you. Are here. Your thermal signature betrays you." Marcus and Xena crouched behind the counter, hardly daring to breathe. The footsteps began climbing the stairs, slow and deliberate. "You have caused considerable trouble with your childish rebellion," Valdrin continued. 3-star systems searched, countless resources expended. All for what? A moment of petulant freedom. Xena pressed her face against Marcus's shoulder, trembling. He could feel her trying to control her natural glow, dimming herself until she was barely visible. "I am not unreasonable." Valdrin's voice was closer now. "Just outside the kitchen. Return with me willingly, and I will overlook this embarrassment."